the regular meeting of the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board of Directors at 7:03 on July 18, 2023. Roll call, please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein.
Present.
Director Bloom.
Present.
Director Jones.
Here.
Director Crowley.
Present.
Director Sonic is absent.
We have a quorum, and please all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States.
There are no reportable items from our closed session. We'll move on to public comments number 1. Do we have any public comment? We got it. Anybody over here?
So we just received one email public comment from Jim Lewis regarding his interest in the board considering getting a cert for the tables.
Yeah, so do you want me to read it out loud?
No,
Okay. Okay.
Could you repeat what your Lewis said?
it's in regards to a cert for the tables at board meetings. You brought this up before, and I sent you an email.
Yeah, he wants a vanity skirt. He wants us to consider in the future having a vanity skirt around the table, seating to a little more professional.
Or is it protected?
Yes, modesty. Not me. No, my legs.
We're gonna take a second just to move this and move it a different angle, if you don't mind.
Okay, what happened?
It's. we can
Oh,
start-
it's on.
Is anybody that does?
So that's the only public comment you have, okay. So, item number 1 is to recognize a very, very special guest today. This Palo Alto's new police chief, Chief Jeff Liu. Jeff. We want to love on you because you've done so much and all these great things in the community. And, congratulations on your new position. It's a long time coming, in my opinion. And the community, I think, appreciates the fact that you're the community, you work for the community. And so just congratulations, my particular because I think you're the first and only Asian police chief in the county.
Oh,
I think in this county, and so, I, you know, from our fire district and police Palo Alto, so doubly special. And so we just wanted to thank you for your service and also for being a big part of our fire district community as well, and the partnership that we have with Palo Alto PD and fire district is something that we value and share, so thank you, thank you. Any other comments, Robert? He lives himself, so.
Well, I think I've been for minutes for a while, and I think he's been hungry there for you. For big things. So. Yeah, favorite detail, you got people over here. And now we got. So. I just like to say, because I was a long time community volunteer, to virtually every activity that was done in the community here, Jeff would be there supporting it in every way. And I tell you, I think it was a great marriage of the civilian and professional staff. So thank you for all the support, and I hope it will continue for many years.
thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm just kidding. It's on your, the newest clerk member. And I actually had a chance to
cross paths with people, of course, we may not remember, it's a certain refuge. Santa Fe, where team that on some of our missions here at East Palo Alto years ago. And it was a great experience, and I think you're a good partner in your district. Glad to have you. Did you work on that one of the other government that has all that? Everywhere, and he ended up walking in the police department. Yeah, I think that found it, yeah, I think, or no, he showed up at the 76 gas. 76, and then, yeah, go to the center, he was down in every town. Yeah. Oh, so I had the pleasure of working with the chief, you'll be a great partner with the district. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
No, from the moment I arrived, the three police chiefs that were part of it all reached out, and I just was impressed with Jeff from the very beginning. For us, it's all about relationships. You just want, when Jeff walked in here, everybody came out to greet him, hug him, and see how he was doing, and you are really for all intents and purposes. So you grew up in this community, at least professionally, last 23 years. Super excited that you have a permanent star on your collar and well deserved, and looking forward to many years of being with Ron. Thank
you so much. And just to add on to what everybody's saying, East Palo Alto is like the one big family. I mean, these guys over here, we've got some stories that I'm not going to do.
States of the family.
Menlo Park Fire in East Palo Alto PD and East Palo Alto community, there is a spectacle on. I mean, not that I've only experienced with other fire departments, but these men and women that you have working in this nation here, the one that like the lifers like Joey that chooses to go to each and every there. It's just a special bond. And I feel like, he's with my brother right here. We have each other's cell phone numbers, and they take my calls at all times, day and night. Just the partnership we have, even with our community members. I love East Palo Alto. This is a city where something bad happens, everybody bands together, and we get through it together. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not going to leave you in, but thank you so much. I love this partnership. We're doing great things, but we're doing it together. It's not me. Everybody around here, all of you. I mean, we all contribute, we all pitch in, and we make everything work, and we make it safer. And nothing. Thank you all. Thank you.
So all the things that we've done and you will continue to do, and one of the times this year. This is the second meeting we had here. Which is one of our newest stations, and so that was the perfect thing to represent on this.
Thank you so much. I remember the old station there. Kind of sad to see it go, but when this came in, it's like, okay, yeah, this is
We're here.
This is fantastic. Can we have a wing? But thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate you all.
But JT, you want to make a public comment? Okay. I think you have a public comment on that one.
Now, the favorite is all happy and I see Jeff Blue, appointed as chief, and, it's been a long time coming. And, I know it's, from the community standpoint, it's really good to have somebody in that position that understands the community, that comes from the area, that has been here for a long time. And it's super important, now somebody that's caring and actually cares about the community. Having that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, going on to the second item, the fire chief's report. Chief?
Thank you, Director, members of the board, members of our community, and those that are listening. Happy to bring you our July fire chief's report. A lot going on. Quick updates on facilities, fire station 4. Still underway. I just checked in with John Hitchcock on the progress today. They should be pouring the remainder of the concrete within the next few weeks. Targeting late August, early September, fingers crossed, and then we'll have a grand opening in our board meeting, hopefully there in October. And then we'll also set up a grand opening for the public to come on. So on, we're going to do that in conjunction with our board meeting, or somewhere around.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah. Just real quickly, also, John is working on an RFP for design services for Station 1. This will probably be discussed a little bit in the report out in the facilities ad hoc committee. Direction to move ahead with developing an RFP, then we have an architect who can help us scope the project. Recruitment and hiring update. IT recruitment, we have filled that position. We have a new employee starting on August 1st. This is to replace Ralph Boner, who is retiring mid-August. So good for us on that one. Firefighter recruitment, this is a big one for us. That is actively ongoing. We've gone through the process, the written exam. We had 197 candidates participate in our video interviews. This is it's a recorded interview process through Spark Hire. It's a firm that does that. So we sit down and go through the process. It allows us, to allow everybody who passed the written exam. It just, that's what it was, pass fail, to move on into that process to go through this initial screening. We have, for each candidate, we have 4 raters that will be reviewing their videos online. And then we'll move the top somewhere between 70 and 80 on from that point into in-person interviews. Then ultimately the top groups will come to the fire chief or fire chief interviews. So along with that, we had an open house at Station 1 on Saturday, July 8th. Great attendance there, between 80 and 100 interested people, and coming to find out about the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. Really what we're trying to do is give everybody the opportunity to come in and learn about us, feel like we're a good fit, give them enough information to start digging about us so they can hopefully be successful in the next portion of the interview process. Other items, an update on the activities in our new community engagement unit. Lots going on there. Just to update, we have 3 new CERT instructors, John Johnston, Heather Keller, Chris, I can't pronounce his last name, our now new certified CERT instructors. Menlo Park Fire District is now a Listos partner. We have a new district instructor, Maria Nieto. She's a resident of North Fair Oaks and obviously a Spanish speaker. Listos is a Spanish and multi-language community preparedness education program. So we're excited to partner in the Listos program. Teen Cert, we have a Teen Cert is going to be presented beginning July 31st. 3 or 4 days, going to be at Station 1. Right now, it's open for, we call it recruitment. We've been advertising pretty heavily in the Almanac and the Palo Alto Daily News. Hopefully we're hoping to get a good number of teens that are interested in being prepared into that class, so it's a nice outreach effort. Heather and John and Mike Taylor, one of our CERT instructors, also attended the National CERT Conference. It happened to be in Burlingame this year, it was great. And Mike even taught a program on communications to that national conference, which was great. We've increased our community outreach. We're now posting through the city of Menlo Park activity guide with all of our CERT activities. Again, we're doing outreach through our 2 local newspapers. Some other things that are going on along that preparedness stuff, we are co-sponsoring, or I should say, we co-sponsor the North Fair Oaks Safety Fair with San Mateo County on July 15th. We had a community CERT input meeting that was stand by and looking for the date on that. It was a couple Saturdays ago. I was on July 11th at Station 1. We had approximately 30 participants from my CERT program that were either there in person or zoomed in. It was something that Heather scheduled. Really good, valuable, ongoing communications with folks, seeing what our CERT communities are interested in and would like. Recently completed classes in the average in June, we had a first aid CPR class with 35 participants, Red Cross Ready with 23 participants, Stop the Bleed class with 11. Then we have upcoming and recently completed classes. We've got a CERT refresher that was done on July 8th. The Red Cross Ready class I just talked about was on July 12th. We did a Woodland Park Apartments Red Cross Ready class on July 13th. The disaster prep day with North Fair Oaks I talked about. And on August 5th, we've got a disaster prep day with San Mateo County that we're going to be participating in, and also new engines. I think everybody should have gotten an email from Chief Coyle that talked a little bit about the new engines going into service along with a fire that we responded to shortly after they put them into service. But we are in the process of placing all of the new engines into service. As you can see, engine 2 out here is one of the new engines that our board approved a number of years ago that we're finally placing in service. I just would like to share with you how much it is appreciated that new equipment that our crews have. They're so excited to put them in service. They kind of have a ritual where they will take the tank water from the old engine and wash the new engine with it, and then replace the bell off the old engine onto the new engine. And then they push the engine into the fire station, just kind of as a tradition, kind of the equivalent of breaking a bottle of champagne on a new ship.
We have done that as a board. Maybe we should do a board christening for these too.
We could do that, yeah. So it's a neat process. It's ongoing. We have a couple more to put in service. They put new truck 4 in service also. Just this past week. So that's all really exciting news. We also had a visit from the FEMA Associate Administrator on June 28th. Her name was Ann Fink. She came out to the warehouse. She was actually attending the National CERT Conference, and since she was out here, she visited, I think, our task force and probably Oakland's also. So we got to sit with her for a couple of hours, share with her some things we were interested, happening in Washington, D.C., including some additional funding that we're hopeful of getting, and talked a little bit about rotation and showed her around. She was very appreciative and impressed by our employees out there in the warehouse. We had another employee event at the Ecumenical Hunger Program. That's the food bank and thrift shop that's right across the street from the warehouse. It's kind of one of these events that Francine and her staff have put together to help us connect with our community and do a little. They're good. It's great, and they've got a leader in there that she is great at putting us to work and keeping us working for the entire time that we're volunteering. So it's a nice way to build a connection with our community and build kind of the spirit of our team, doing something good. This on Sunday, July 9th, we actually opened up the Station 1 training room to a group. I don't even know if the group had a specific name director.
Yeah, it was the San Mateo chapter of the Organization of Chinese Americans, which is actually a national group that does a lot of advocacy for primarily the Chinese community throughout the country. This project was a crane making project that started, I think, in June. In response to the Half Moon Bay shooting of the farm workers back during the Lunar New Year in late January. So the idea was actually thought up by one of the high school interns to do an intergenerational, day of peace kind of thing for, and the 3,000 cranes is a symbol of peace and healing. And so actually tonight, Half Moon Bay City Council is going to hopefully approve this exhibit, not even an exhibit, this installation of 1,000 cranes at the Half Moon Bay Farm. But thank you for opening up the station. Here's our second one. We had about 25 people.
Well, I was pretty impressed. I didn't know what to expect.
From all over.
There was, yeah, I don't have fine motor skills, so I didn't.
So you didn't
know
hold cranes.
Holding of the paper cranes, but it was definitely multi-generational from 6 up to 80 or 90.
Yeah.
And that was really neat community meeting there, so that was pretty neat. Before I get into the response times, I'll go through a couple other things I have in here. There's an Elks Lodge is recognizing fire and police officers tomorrow night in Redwood City here at Cleansville. Recognized. I attended a badge getting ceremony for the new Woodside Fire Chief Sherry, and they were painting badges on a number of people. That was yesterday. Also at the Elks Lodge, a number of our staff were there. Response times. There are actually some response times that I have provided. This is our first baby step into the response time arena, but that's had been one of my internal goals and one of the board goals also. Talk about data analytics. What I provided here is it is just our EMS response time. It's broken down by engine. I've got basically two components to each of the response times. The turnout time is basically the amount of time for when the engine is dispatched and when the wheels are turning. Travel time is just that. It's the amount of time it takes from them when they leave the station to get on scene. So we have an average and we have a 90th percentile measurements that are displayed there. In general, the fire service uses the 90th percentile as their measuring component, but I wanted to provide a good amount of information. Then I've also, so all that we have there is our 7 engines and our 2 ladder trucks, just for EMS calls, so it excludes public service, traffic collision, and fire. We will at some point in time start also building those out, but I wanted to at least get in front of you a glimpse of how we're performing on our response times. And then I have down at the bottom there, basically the aggregate combined values for all of our engines in the district and all of our trucks in the district at 90%. So right now, the EMS agency is asking that we respond to 90% of our EMS calls at 6 minutes and 59 seconds or less. So as you can see, we're very close. It's interesting. I pulled the data or asked Travis Koosman, our EMS director, for his data. He shows us meeting the response times, but it's blended with some other agencies. So I was just really trying to ground truth to make sure. It's other data compared to ours is in there. So
And this is just ours.
this is just ours.
And Chief, just for clarity, the turnout is from the time the tone goes off to the time the truck leaves.
That's in theory what it is, I can't tell you for absolutely sure that the clock starts exactly when the bell goes off, or if it's once, there may be some dispatch component to it there. I thought they.
Yeah, because the earlier meeting and had the screen that when the call came in, it popped up and started a timer.
Oh, good.
And it was a little under 2 minutes before the clear.
Yeah, because it's interesting, when the bell went off, I started my stopwatch on my phone, just to see how quickly they got out. Because I'm looking at these times here, and these guys were, out of the chute in about a minute, 15 seconds, and I'm like, okay, let's just. And maybe they were faster because the fire chief was here and board, or I don't know.
I was gonna say they're delayed because their engine wasn't in the bay.
Because of us, right?
So it's, it's one of these things where I want to start providing you with some information so you can see it. I still will just always add that disclaimer that we're still digging into the numbers, making sure everything's true and accurate, but we believe these are pretty.
Chuck, you have a question about response?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Gary's comment. So back there, this does not include dispatch from the time the call comes in for the county.
Yeah, that is not included in these numbers. The dispatch time.
And the last time we heard, those were sometimes ranging shouldn't be over a minute, but 1 to 2 minutes.
Yeah, I've asked PSC, the dispatch center, for their data, so they're supposed to get it to me as soon as they have it, I'll share it with the board. But I mean, the reality is it's all three of those components, it's the amount of time. Yeah, and then there's another piece that's almost impossible to measure, and that's the amount of time it takes for the call to be transferred to the dispatch. Because all 911 calls go into law enforcement. They have to determine what type of call it is, and if it's a fire call, they need to send it to fire dispatch. So there's another piece in there that almost nobody measures. But yeah, there's all of it matters, right? It's from when you dial 911, there's recorded components. It's also the time it takes police to process and switch to fire dispatch, the amount of time it takes fire dispatch to send it out to us, those go off. The amount of time it takes us to get on the engine, and the amount of time it takes us to call.
So
It's worth, I was just gonna note something on that same comment, it's worth noting in that total dispatch time from the time the call comes in to the time the engine shows up on scene is not completely stagnant time with the resident. The dispatchers actually have flip cards, and for serious medical things, they'll actually start getting the people to administer treatment based on their flip cards. So it's not a thank you for your call and hang up. The engine's gonna show up 7 or 8 minutes later. They may be walking somebody through having a CPR over the phone.
the 7 minute or 6:59 target includes though that dispatch
It
time.
does not. The requirement from the MSA does not include the dispatch time.
This was
So the
when,
variance between, the average and the 92,000, 200 years old, and a half. That maybe that time.
So that's more of it's a statistics kind of thing, when the average, she had everything up and divided by the number of calls. The 90th percentile is you look at, if you have 10 times, you have 10 incidents you're looking at, you look at the 9th time, and that's your 90th percentile. Means 90% of the time you had a time that was faster than those, and then you got that one time over there. So it doesn't reflect anything in, as far as the dispatch times go, or the dispatch processing time. But that would be, that's an important component. And getting them.
Stephen, I'm not questioning you, but it'd be nice to really know exactly what this is, because when I've seen it analyzed in our staff reports before, they would typically say, dispatch should take 1 minute, turnout should take 2 minutes, travel time should take 4 minutes. And those were the breakdowns, and it did include dispatch. And so again, the reports then might have been wrong, and I don't know what the answer is. As we look at standards, we ought to be clear. But these times, and again, I'm happy we're starting to get data, but we're not meeting the target at most of our stations at this point. And there is, I think, a serious problem with calls being rerouted first to police, and nobody knows where they go and how long it takes before they get fired. And and particularly with the EMS, people not breathing for 7 minutes is a serious problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And those are probably some conversations we can have with the board at some point in time. I'll come back to the board with some recommendations for us establishing what our district standards should be. I've been digging through old staff reports to see if we actually have a specific standard, and it's I found some recommendations, but I haven't found where the adopted goal or standing protocol, so. The one that was.
If you could find a report by Don Long, Don Long did an extensive staff report on it and broke down all the pieces. This is probably 5 years ago, but
There's quite a bit on our website related to reporting out to the board on the dispatch times. And some recommendations and national standards, but what would be helpful is for the board to come up with what we determine is the appropriate standard for us. The EMS standard was developed during the ambulance contract negotiations. Right, whether, and, you know, a lot of it will depend on our resources, where we have our stations located. There's, you know, when you look at those, the travel time, for example.
Yeah.
There's almost nothing we can do with the travel time. We don't necessarily want our people to drive faster. Part of it is where our stations are located and traffic and congestion.
I was gonna ask, I mean, is there any room to work with the city? I mean, I'm looking with the cities to see what they can do to help us get our.
Sure,
I mean,
it's traffic preemption is sometimes helpful. We have traffic preemption devices on a number of the lights, so the lights will turn green in advance of us coming. The one area where, that we might be able to move faster, I don't know, it's the turnout time, there's, part of it is digging into what that component is, and sometimes it may seem a little bit slow. Yeah, especially that's why I turn on my stopwatch, let's see what it is, and so it makes me think, watching how quickly they got out. And my guess is that's happening at just about every station, that feels like there's a piece of time that we're missing. So, but that's probably the only area that we can affect this. Yeah, we don't want anyone to injure themselves running or sprinting to the fire truck, but getting folks to move quickly and making sure that's an important part of that. But yeah, a lot more to come on additional analytics, and then also coming back to the board with some recommendations on developing some actual district approved standards.
This is a great start for that.
Sure. Next item, just sharing with everyone that National Night Out is coming on Tuesday, August 1st. That's a law enforcement event that usually fire is supporting. We are reaching out. I know we already have been reached out to by Atherton and we're participating. We're reaching out to our other law enforcement agencies to see if they'd like us to come out. But our staff will also be out and going around on that Tuesday night. One other thing that belongs up there is just, I've been working with Little House. I know they have, I think their 75th anniversary is coming up, that we're going to support. Also, I'm going to go on a ride along with them in their Meals on Wheels program on July 31st. Again, back on vacation. Incidents to note, the two Redwood City fires, Redwood City's been busy. We supported them in a 3-alarm residential fire and a 2nd-alarm commercial fire. That will be one of the pieces of information, speaking of Redwood City, that I know the board's interested in, is mutual aid in and out of our district, so that'll be a piece of information. Sure. We also have.
you say you'd be sharing.
Sharing the data, like, the amount of, is it the balance of mutual aid or automatic aid?
Oh, the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers, yeah. How many do we go on? How much do we receive? How much do we give? And just so we're transparent on what that looks like. We had an unfortunate incident in East Palo Alto on June 21st on Shembri Lane. We had a dog mauling with a somewhere between a 1 and 2-year-old young child that was mauled by a dog. What we've had recently is news that there's a good outcome. I don't remember who the little boy is out of the hospital, actually recovering very well, and everything's looking pretty good. So that was for a while kind of touching together there. We also had since I printed this, a structure fire with rescue in the 3,000 block of Glendale Avenue in North Fair Oaks. This was on July 13th. It was a 2-story and an upper story. We had one apartment on fire. The gentleman whose occupancy that occurred in was, I don't know, he had a lot of cats, right? And most of the cats perished in the fire, but he left his door open, which impacted the stairwell. So the family across the way couldn't get out. They evacuated to their balcony and they were rescued by I think it was engine 3 or engine 5, as the one that Chief Fletcher did. So it was legitimate rescue via ladder on that, so that was good. That one, that was, the value of the building was $3 million. The structural loss was $270,000 with $15,000 in property loss. And like I said, a large number of cats perishing in there too.
Can be for rescue.
Yeah, that was good. That is it.
Any
Back
questions?
to you, George.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Chuck?
I want to ask you about the rescue, just out of curiosity. So they're out on the balcony. Was the danger for them the flames or was it the smoke?
Yeah, I don't think the flames actually impacted their occupancy. The damage was limited mostly to the occupancy or the apartment of origin, but they couldn't evacuate the smoke was.
And if they had jumped or whatever, they would have been.
They would have been injured, usually from a second story balcony, just depends, break some legs or.
There's just a lot of those kind of structures here with no padding or something underneath it.
Yeah.
And most people don't have ladders or anything, so it's something to be nice if we can figure out a solution for all these apartment buildings here. I want to ask you though about the RFP for design services for Station 1.
Sure.
I think we do need to get some design services, so I'm not quarreling with that, but I think we need to discuss this because I think, and I could be wrong, so you can correct me, Station 1 is really not accurate. This is a fire station, this is a potential training tower, this is potential offices, this is potential meeting rooms. There's a whole bunch of stuff that could be included in here. And before we start designing this stuff, we ought to be talking about what we really want and need. And I think that should come before we hire the person to start working on it.
And that's the intent, is to really help us get together our stakeholders, our internal stakeholders, and figure out exactly what these. You're right, it's not just a fire station, it could be administrative build offices, it could be some training props. We know it's a new fire station, probably a minimum. And so that's what we're trying to do. This is the very preliminary kind of thing. This is not the full architectural build us a fire station process. It's what's commonly referred to as a charrette, where you work with an architect to help bring people together and scope things out, come up with a couple of options, get some approximate pricing on it, and then come to the board. Well, actually, it'd be the facilities ad hoc. I guess.
I want to suggest, unfortunately, we had tried to do a facilities planning. We did a contract with facilities planning. It got co-opted by staff and taken down the wrong direction. What we want to do is find out what our needs were for the next 20 years. And I'm not talking about filing, I'm talking about administrative office and so forth. One of the things that concerns me, I think one of the wonderful things about the station is that we do have a community room. That's where we met. But when I was here, not obviously today, the community room now is actually someone's private office. And so here we had a need for a community room, the community was all behind it, we funded it, we did it, but we needed an extra office for someone, and now it's gone. And we need to do some planning so we figure out how many offices do we really need, where are we gonna put those offices? And I think that needs to be done before we start building the buildings. So that we can be sure we're accommodating for the next foreseeable future. I don't know the right way to do that, but it could be. I think it's too small for just, I think the facilities committee is too small for just that committee. I think they can certainly raise the issues and raise the questions, but I think we need to have a study session with the board or something to discuss how many captains are we gonna need? How many battalion chiefs are we gonna need? How many administrative people are we gonna need? And what kinds of space do we need to plan for? Maybe not even build, just plan for in the next 20 years.
I think some of those, there was a meeting assessment done, I think, a couple of years ago. And I think that's what some of the information we gleaned right now from that. We're gonna use this out there, it's being used right now to begin facilitating understanding that long-term planning. And I think what the chief is talking about is that now that has been done, now we're beginning to put a little bit more, on the scale, out there, in terms of understanding for the community of the community benefits that may be necessary. And I think that's pretty much what you talk about, in the community coming in and use the fire station, like they use this, that kind of thing. I think those are the kind of information that we talked about, but there are different stakeholders engaging. I think that's what we're trying to do, is look at the stakeholders, trying to understand what the stakeholders might want, or more opportunity. One proposal down to the station or where they are, those are the kind of things that we can sort it through. So as the architect, what we're going to design the structure, we have some idea as to where did it go at that point in time. So from that particular perspective, then you start looking at the cost. And we did talk about how much this would make cost us as a district to build not only Station 1, but all these other ones. I try to work on as well, and what financing plan we're going to talk about a little bit today, how that's going to be financed. Because there are steps in the process.
That can you back up to that? Yeah, Robert's absolutely right. That's what we hope to do. We never got the need defined. In other words, it never said we're gonna have this many employees or this many people will need private offices or whatever. We never got a count of that. What we got is we can put the parking underground or we can put it at ground level. And there's a big debate about that. But that was more the means of how to do it. We never got how many cars are we trying to park, and so forth. And that was the real need that I think we needed to figure out.
So, yeah, my experience with the charrette process is that generally leads you through that as part of the discussion with the architect, is looking, and it's not having a consultant help you with your needs, it's really just that study group, with the stakeholders, trying to anticipate where do we think we're gonna be in 20 years, so we don't design something that's already too small to risk for otherwise. And it's, what we're proposing doing is not, the cart before the horse, which would be hiring an architect to actually do the full design. This is someone who has the skill to lead us through the process, give some conceptual drawings, can look at the space and figure out what we can fit and give us some ideas, and then help us with some pricing also. And again, it would be based on what do we anticipate, where are we going to grow, how much, all those things. So it's kind of like architect, right? And then at some point in time, once we figure out, when I say we can figure out what we can afford, what we want to design and build, we engage either that same architect or a new architect can actually help us move that forward. So it's the very preliminary process to help us do, I think, exactly what you're talking about.
So design, you're also including defining the need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the term design services here might be a little misleading on the report. As I see it as really kind of the requirements and conceptual ideas. And conceptual ideas have to go take into account, we have a certain size plot of land, we have certain restrictions, we're gonna have neighborhood requirements, other things. So it's really a combination of requirements, conceptual look at the land and what can be put there. Versus when I hear design, I think you're hearing design is in somebody's doing the blueprints to build the complex, and that's not
that's not, that's way down the road. This is the very much the requirements of conceptual design.
Anything else?
So I only have just one other thing on the chief's report, just, when we're looking at the EMS response time, which is terrific, it's really good to get data, so thank you for that. The thing that we might find is helpful on the turnout and on travel as well, is kind of data. So we can start factoring in and pick windows of time that we're looking at. So we're looking at, kind of the midday, or we're looking at commute time, or we're looking at nighttime. Nighttime affects turnout, obviously. But travel time is very dependent on time of day.
Yeah, that's a great.
And so,
Can we get that?
Yeah.
Okay. great.
so, and how that data, there's some other ways to present it that might be interesting to look at. I can work with you offline on that, which is other than, kind of an Excel spreadsheet, is actually doing more of the scatter diagrams, which actually do, what I call a heat map of the data. And it generates, and it'll show that, hey, we have a big concentration of calls at, from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 p.m. And during that concentration of time, that's when we miss our travel time response. All other hours of the day, we're making travel response. And the time of day plays a huge role in both turnout and response time. So if we can start blending some of that into this, that will be helpful.
Yeah, and
I'll leave it to you, the details of the, but I'm happy to chat offline.
Sure.
Ways to do that.
it's a great idea, Gary, because I was looking at the 6:03, 6 minutes and 3 seconds travel time for engine 77.
It's completely dependent on the traffic on Facebook. I mean, I guess, or Willow Road. Yeah, I had to guess.
Yeah,
That
So that would
area
be
is
really
congested
good.
rush hour.
you
Well,
know,
extended rush hour,
yeah,
4 hours.
yeah. Any other comments, questions?
Well,
Great.
just to follow up with what Gary said, I think you should look at the whole picture. I'm agreeing with Gary, but rather than picking certain times, I think it would be nice to show all the times, because I think we're dealing with different problems at different times of the day.
That's what it means now, Chuck.
I know, I'm agreeing with you, but I thought you suggested, let's talk about certain times.
No, what it will do is lead you to a better picture of what's happening.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And one other thing, I think it would tell us something, if we could ever chart it about dispatch, if there were times of day where that's an issue also.
That's good. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull off anything?
Yeah.
Item 4, please.
Okay. There, anyone else? There a motion to approve the consent calendar for items 3 and 5.
I'll move, we approve the consent items for 3 and 5. Good.
Okay, any discussion or public comment, Michelle, on the consent calendar? Okay, roll call please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solomon, absent, Director Troy.
Aye. So that motion carries. And Chuck, you pulled item 4, which is the treasurer's report.
Yeah, it's just a simple question, but I wanted to ask about page 14 in the packet. Which is 2 of 8 of the treasurer's report. I just wanted to understand at the top of the page, the 3rd bullet point, where it talks about completing the ACH payment option set up in the district bank account. I was just curious what we're using ACH for. These are, I mean, ACH would be where we're, I assume, taking money from people for someone for certain things.
No, it's actually the opposite. So basically, the ACH payment option is for the vendors. So historically, the district or us, we have been only paying them through manual checks, so paper checks. So now we're moving towards electronic payments. So we now have the option to pay them through ACH or direct deposit.
I see. So this is for our vendors.
Correct.
We don't get payments from anyone automatically. Is that correct?
We do for some of the vendors, we set them up, like for some specific vendors, let's say, for example, CalPERS. CalPERS, for example, CalPERS, we pay, our, let's say, our contributions or, UAL payments. What we do is, in their system, we set up our bank account, basically as an ACH option. So whenever we authorize the payment, the CalPERS would, automatically debit our account. So basically, it's like, an electronic transfer, like an automatic payment from them, from us, basically. So instead of us initiating it using our EV system, it's then we initiate it for sure, we authorize it, but it's like a direct debit from our account to their.
Okay, so when we're paying bills, you would have a batch of bills to be paid, is that
Correct.
right? Okay. And somebody approves that, and there's some sort of process for dealing with that.
That's right.
When you're doing the ACH payments, you'd have the same thing, I assume.
Correct.
You have a batch and it has a whole bunch of payments that are ready to go. Is it the exact same process for both?
It's the same exact process, whether we pay it through checks or through ACH or direct debit. It's just the mode of payment that's different. So instead of us cutting the checks manually,
Right.
it's now electronic. So we have that option now.
Okay, and it flows into the general ledger
Correct.
exactly the same way?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question, then, I'll move to approve, the item.
The
4.
treasurer's report?
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion, public comment on that, Michelle? Okay, roll call please.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom, Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano is absent, Director Polly.
Aye. That motion carries. And now we'll go to item 6, which is approve the third amendment to the employment agreement between the Menlo Park Fire Protection District and Fire Chief Mark Lorenzen. So basically, I just want to say that the two main provisions in this are one, the salary will be $333,800 per year. And also the contract will be extended through June 30th, 2027. Those are really the main provisions. So is there a motion to approve the third amendment to the employment agreement between the fire district and Fire Chief Mark Lorenzen?
I'm making a motion that we approve, the third amendment to the employment agreement for the fire.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Any public comment, Michelle? Roll call, please.
Could you just make the announcement for anybody who might be listening about where they can see the contract and so forth?
Well, the
And
contract
where
will be
will
on the website. Once it's approved tonight, it will be on the website, like all of our other contracts.
We also do tonight.
Yeah, and it'll be on the,
We all there. Okay.
yeah.
It normally appears on the HR page,
Yeah.
under benefits,
Under,
under labor.
labor,
Yeah, that's all
all,
of the
all,
contracts.
all the other
Will have
contracts.
my contract and all of the amendments.
Yeah. Okay, roll call, please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano is absent, Director Polly.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item 7, which is to adopt the district's revised investment policy for fiscal year 2023-24 and discuss the recommended investment strategy. So, Elaine, I know you prepared this. I don't know if you want to start this or see.
Yeah.
Elaine's probably.
Yeah, I'm gonna start it off, but I'm gonna turn it over to Wally and then are here with us. Yeah, so-
CFM is here with us.
Yeah, so basically just some sort of a historical background. So as you all are aware, the contract with DFM was approved last May. So as a start, so basically, before actually investing in our funds, one of the few things that we did is, we scheduled like meetings with them just to discuss the investment policy, the things that we need to change, update, or revise. And after that, we also discussed the potential, or recommended, investment strategy. So I'm just going to summarize, the major changes for the investment policy, but I'm going to turn it over to Wally to discuss the details. So for the investment policy, there's three major changes for me. And then the summary can actually be found on attachment A, I believe. The first major change is really, we actually included additional permitted investments on our policy. So before we didn't have this type of investments such as supranationals, asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, as well as the inclusion of, LGIP, which, or CAMP, which falls under LGIP. So that's the first major change. Second one is, as recommended by the finance committee as well, we also changed, some of the limits for the investment policy. We went a little bit more conservative with regards to the limits for our investments as well as, the single issuer limits as well. And the third one is, just, additional clarification language for some of the permitted investments as well as the delegation of authority to the investment advisor. And now I will turn it over to Wally from PFM to discuss the details and as well as, to discuss the investment strategy as well.
Also, can I just make one clarification? I know that there's been a delegation to the investment manager, but it's not a full discretionary.
Correct.
Situation. So,
So the district-
so the district is involved with that decision-making process.
Right, so basically the district delegates it to the district treasurer, which
Yeah.
is me.
Yeah.
And then we delegate a portion of the things such as, trades, like daily trades, to the investment advisor. So basically the district treasurer still has a full responsibility and the full oversight for the investment process.
Thank you. And welcome, PFM. Thank you for helping us put our investment policy.
Good pleasure.
Hello, good evening. So I will be sharing my screen to get started with the presentation to go over the investment strategy. So just give me 1 second. All right, so over the course of the month of June, we had a few meetings with the Finance Committee to discuss, two major items. Number one, as was mentioned before, was the investment policy and mostly making changes to the permitted investments in the policy. The second thing that we discussed was looking at the district's cash flow and then creating an investment strategy around that, which I will go into in a little bit more detail. So as mentioned before, with the investment policy and permitted investments, California code pretty much limits investments to the fixed income sector of the investment world. And our goal there is to diversify, the investment policy based on what's allowed by code, and then also to maintaining good liquidity and high quality credit throughout the portfolio. With that being said, the investment policy, as we originally received it, did allow most of the permitted investments that are allowed with government code, but we did add a few more, as was mentioned, local government investment pools or LGIPs, supranational obligations, and also asset-backed securities. So these were the three major investment asset classes that were added to the policy. Also too, with the conversation with the investment, the Finance Committee, we did set limits around total portfolio allocations as well as issuer limits that the Finance Committee was comfortable with, and outlined that in the policy as well. Secondly, we looked at cash flow to assess, okay, what would the strategy be to take a look at how much money should be kept liquid to maintain short-term obligations, etc., and then how much of the portfolio can be invested in a longer-term strategy. So we looked at seasonality, looking at where balances were higher and where balances were lower. And then also to looking at creating a liquidity cushion based on various seasonal cash flows throughout the year. And based on that discussion, what we did find was based on the available assets that the district had, that about $57 million of the portfolio could be invested in a longer term strategy, and creating a 15% liquidity cushion around that strategy. So that was what we discussed. And then looking at the benchmark, so basically looking at how we're going to start measure performance, how the benchmark compares when we look at risk and return. When we look at the benchmark, we want to choose something that's independent, and then also has a good asset mix, good credit quality, and we're looking at duration of the portfolio. And basically, the portfolio, what we're looking at is does the portfolio diversification outperform a benchmark, usually that's comprised of U.S. Treasuries. So with that being said, the strategy that we settled on was the 0 to 3 strategy, 0 to 3 year strategy, and using the 0 to 3 year Treasury benchmark as our measurement of performance. And you can kind of see where the allocations of the maturities are within that benchmark by looking at the light blue bars. When you look at performance over time, now one of the things I will mention is in this interest rate environment, because the yield curve is inverted and we've seen such an aggressive rate hike from a 0 rate environment to now a 5% rate environment on the shorter end of the curve, that you'll see that the 0 to 1 year Treasury, at least for now, is outperforming most of the longer term maturities. But this is something that we expect to adjust over time as we get back to a normal rate environment where the yield curve is no longer inverted. So when we look at the $57 million and how it will be invested, based on California code, we're looking at a 0 to 3 year strategy with a mix of treasuries, agencies, mortgage-backed securities, supranationals, municipals, commercial paper, corporate notes, and asset-backed securities, with a gross target yield of about 5.44%. So, based on the diversification of the portfolio, with very, very high credit quality, that's our expected gross yield based on that allocation decision. And that's pretty much it. So once we approve the policy and we've approved the benchmark, we can go ahead and start making those allocation decisions and investing the funds as necessary. Any questions?
Yeah, I'll look for questions and comments.
Yeah.
So finance committee went through the policy in extensive detail, I think, with EFM and with staff. And I just want to mention the chart on page 15, 3850. It seems like we're meeting with the sideshow.
This is in.
Yes, so on appendix number 2, what's there is the California code limits on the first 2 columns. So that was kind of what the initial proposal from EFM came in, was based on California code. The committee, as we discussed it, weren't really comfortable in all categories with giving as much latitude to staff or to EFM to go all the way to what California code allows. So we took a more conservative approach. So what's in the second 2 columns is the district limits that we're putting in place. So if you take something like, that we're proposing in the policy as edited. So if you take something like corporate medium-term notes, California law allows it to be 30% of the portfolio. One issuer could be a concentration of 10%. The committee said, okay, well, we're okay with 20% of the portfolio, but we'd only like a maximum concentration of one issue of 5%. So we cut it in half. And so we pretty much adjusted the vast majority of the new categories of investment and brought those down to something that we felt was more aligned to the conservative approach that the board has talked about as we make a shift from, kind of ultra conservative, moving over to managed, investment management firm. And so we felt it was appropriate to bring down many of these limits and bring down pretty significantly the limits on some of the single issuers, so we don't end up with a concentrated position in any one particular issue.
And so the numbers that you arrived at in terms of the maximum percentage, that is based on the, your experience in terms of actually going through and trying to break from these bigger categories.
Yeah, I think what I would tell you is it was, don't want to be self-serving here, but it's heavily biased by, what I have, which is kind of a belief of a conservative investment strategy and not taking abnormal amounts of risk. And these are numbers that I believe do not, by making these changes, they don't materially change our outcome. Are we going to leave some interest in some potential gains on the table? Absolutely. But the other side of that same point is we're going to mitigate risk. And so it's a risk reward scenario, but this was heavily influenced by my own conservative investment views.
Well,
Just take one example. Just take one example where you did a good thorough feel about it. On the commercial space, it had California, where it's maximum portfolio 4%, then it dropped down to, I guess, 1 to 10%. But then in the district, it went from 10% and then down to 2%. When we walk through that,
Yeah,
conservative approach, I see how conservative it is, sure.
yeah. So to use that one as an example, and PFM should interject.
Yeah,
Well, California, just to be clear, California already puts a tremendous number of restrictions around the kinds of commercial paper that public agencies can invest in California. So it's already kind of has a conservative dial on it. But sitting here today, the perspective I put on it is we don't hold any commercial paper. And what I would not want to see is 90 days from now, we look at a report and suddenly 40% of our funds are invested in commercial paper. And I didn't think that level of concentration as we move into some of these new styles of investment are appropriate. But if I look out 90 days from now or 6 months from now and I say, okay, well, 10% of our portfolio is now in commercial paper with 0 before, I'm comfortable going from 0 to 10. I was uncomfortable going 0 to 40%. And then secondly, I just believe that on the concentration side of things, you're better off having 5 investments at 2% each than a single investment in one particular piece of commercial paper at 10%. And it's just risk mitigation. It's called diversification. Very simple, for me, a very simple methodology and that's really what the maximum percentage of one issuer does, is it forces more diversification in the portfolio versus less. Not necessarily more convenient for PFM, but it has to be more work for them, but definitely adds to the diversification in the portfolio. And I should turn to PFM to see if you have anything to add to that commentary.
Yeah, I think this is Monique Spike from PFM AM. I think you're right that the California Government Code in and of itself is very conservative. And we often see public agencies, when they're starting a new investment program from cash, look to limit the limits on sectors and sort of have a slowly move into it approach over time. And so this is certainly something that we can revisit in the future as we grow into the investment program. You will be glad to know that PFM Asset Management ourselves has a very thorough issuer diversification program. So, despite the issuer limits, we work ourselves to ensure that we don't have an over concentration to any one issuer. And oftentimes, some issuers may be limited to less than 2%, depending on what sector we're in. So we'll be working to ensure diversification, not only by sector, but by issuer within those sectors across the board. And of course, we will have reporting out to your staff that will contain lots of details on that.
And to be clear, this was not a lack of confidence in PFM and their processes. by us setting these limits in our policy though, this is what their compliance group will be monitoring to make sure that our policy doesn't violate any of these things. So if we just left the kind of less conservative California code, versus a more conservative district code, then the compliance team itself, we'd be dependent on kind of our verbal instructions with the investment firm. Their compliance group would really be able to monitor compliance to this more conservative approach. So this guarantees that we get tighter compliance to a more conservative approach to investment policy.
It basically sticks to the whole concept and philosophy of principal preservation, right? Because these are tax dollars that we're investing. And I like the diversification piece. I'm just curious, I haven't been in the markets myself lately. So how is the inventory on some of these things and the turnover? It's a lot of diversification, which I think is important, but I just don't even know that that market is the thing. It's been for any of these, for commercial paper, for example. Those are usually very short term.
Mhm.
Right. How's the inventory, I guess, is my concern.
The inventory of commercial paper, we trade about $2 billion of securities daily. So we have really good access to the market, and we also have direct access to some commercial paper issuers. Given the strategy that Wale discussed in the 0 to 3 year area, we do expect to use commercial paper for that 0 to 1 year maturity bucket in your portfolio. Max commercial paper is about 270 days, but we do find supply. There's really decent yield right now, and we think we'll be able to source. Now, what I will say is that once we get the authority to trade, per the earlier comment, our compliance team will take your investment policy, code it into the systems, and then they would be authorizing us to trade once they've done that and tested all the rules. If we enter the market and don't find, viable opportunity, then we will likely invest the funds in treasuries until we find an investment that meets our relative value standards.
Great, thank you.
Is there a waterfall? I mean, it's fun and conversations and stuff. Is there a waterfall that is going through? Are we just going to go from the top to the bottom, or you mentioned something like if you don't find something, then there's the next alternative you move to in terms of that money?
I don't think that's this.
That's not what this is trying to represent.
Yeah, I would consider the way we manage investment assets for public agencies is we always use the treasury sector as our baseline. The portfolio that Wale showed as the sample portfolio is our view of the market today. We had our portfolio management team go out, take a look at the policy recommendations, what they saw in the market, and what they would ultimately recommend. However, as you know, things change in the market on a day-by-day basis. So what I'm saying is that, when we actually get that authority, once compliance is signed off and we're ready to trade, we're going to take a fresh look at the market. And the sample portfolio we put together may be our ideal, but depending on what's happening in the market, we may want to utilize treasuries until relative value gets back to a place that we find attractive. So another way to put that is, we're not just going to buy corporate notes or commercial paper just because it's on the sample portfolio. We want to make sure when we buy it, it meets our risk return and your risk return objectives.
No, I mean, there's a lot to it.
I think it's great.
Yeah, I think PFM did a really nice job along the staff on the edits. Some of the edits are just things where California code has changed since we left at our policy. And some edits are because we hired an investment firm and wanted to add these additional classes, but they've done a really nice job on it. The committee, like I said, spent a lot of time on it and pretty thorough edits of some changes.
The novice that I am, I find it very and to pull together, and I got this now really I Fine, fine.
I had a number of questions I'd like to ask. They're relatively short though. The advice about the ability to invest roughly $50 million. I'm just curious if that, how that changes over time. Is that based on looking at our obligations periodically, or is that based on a percentage, or what's the, how are we going to adjust the 50 million over time?
That's a great question. So our process is to initially do the cash flow analysis, and what we found is there's about 57 to 60 million that we would recommend you invest for the longer term. Now that will change over time. What we'll be doing is we'll be refreshing that analysis at least every 2 years to ensure that we're taking a look at cash flow patterns as they change. We'll also be meeting with your staff on a quarterly basis and continuing to remain in touch with them on any expectations on the use of funds, any information on new cash proceeds that may be coming available. This is not a set it and forget it type affair with the cash flow analysis. We will continue to review that, continue to revise it. The goal being to make sure that the investment program is optimal at all times.
Thank you. And then I want to ask about let's just say, and I'm not advising or anything, I just was curious. Let's just say we wanted to take risks and invest $70 million instead of 50. What are our opportunities for borrowing money in the short term until some of these securities came due? What's the source of borrowing for an agency like us?
That's a good question. I will say that the 60 million that we identified from our cash flow analysis could be bigger depending on how much liquidity the district wants to maintain. We recommended a 15% liquidity cushion. The district will have additional cash outside of that 60 million, which will be invested in liquid investments, whether the state pool, the camp pool, bank deposits, etc. So there is more cash available outside of the securities portfolio that we showed as a sample. With regard to excess funds or other funds, that's not necessarily our area of expertise, but we do know that other local agencies may access the capital markets to borrow assets for capital projects or other things.
And we're talking about a really short-term kind of thing. I mean, are there agencies that will kind of overinvest and then go into some sort of overnight market or something like that to be able to cover their obligations?
Yeah, I think borrowing or margin or leveraging is not necessarily allowable for California government code for these types of agencies in the way that you're describing.
Thank you. Let me ask you another thing, and I'm actually looking right now at page 36 of the investment policy. Up at the top of the page, the ethics and conflicts of interest. I just want to ask you again, I asked when we had our interview with you before, but I just want to verify. An affiliate, or I don't have the right term, but an affiliate of your organization actually has funds. Is that correct? Investment funds?
I believe so. We at PFM Asset Management have the Multi-Manager Series Trust, which is a investment vehicles for other post-employment benefit trust and pensions. We also are a wholly owned subsidiary of US Bank Asset Management, which has the First American funds. We are the investment advisor and program administrator for the California Asset Management Program, or CAMP, as well.
Are there any limitations here on your ability to invest in funds that you're kind of indirectly related to?
There are no such restrictions listed. However, for example, if the district does invest in CAMP, which is a highly popular investment program, we would not charge you asset management fees for the funds that are invested in CAMP. In other words, we don't have a program where we will be charging you assets on top of fees that we may receive from our other programs. Also, we do serve as a fiduciary to the district. We are required and do, as our reputation suggests, make recommendations for your best interest, not ours.
So let me ask about the fiduciary things. I'm kind of taking a worst case question here, really, just to reassure myself. As a fiduciary, if somehow you had some relationship to a potential investment, what's your obligation to us, or how would you inform us, or whatever of that?
We have to disclose conflicts of interest.
Okay, and that would be a conflict of interest in your opinion? Is investing in one of the funds?
I mean, the way I would define conflict of interest is would a reasonable person consider that a conflict of interest?
Thank you. Let me then ask on page 41 of this. I didn't know what was being talked about. You don't have to go into great detail, but I'm not clear about what the collateral requirements mean and which investments require some sort of collateral to support
them. I'm pulling up that language, or I'm intending to pull up that language.
In your policy, section 9.
Section 9, yeah.
Thank you.
Realize you don't have our page numbers.
Yeah, section 9 collateral. That's the section.
Thank you. Just a moment. And Wale, if you have the policy, perhaps you could share your screen. We can all look at the language together.
It's respect to what part is bothering you.
it doesn't bother me. I just don't know what requires collateral. I just don't understand what it equates to. What investment? Yeah, what investments require collateral, or what this is even referring to.
Oh, thank you. This collateral language is specific to the collateral that's required to be held at banks for California public agencies. California law requires that depositories secure deposits over and above the FDIC insurance limits with collateral.
It's only banks.
Yes.
I see, but are banks part of our investment policy?
This language, I believe, was already in the policy, and we did not adjust it. Many public agencies do include language in their policies regarding deposits. Not necessarily all of them, but some do.
Let me just summarize. So, for example, collateral doesn't relate to commercial paper, for example, right?
Correct.
Okay. I just didn't understand how it belonged there. And I guess what you're saying is, in a way it doesn't. It relates to our depository policy.
Yeah, and like as I said, some public agencies do address deposits in their investment policy, so it did not stand out as an item that necessarily needed to be stricken.
Okay. And then on the very next page, page 42, I'm sorry, this is under number 11, diversification. Again, this is just lack of understanding on my part. I'm not questioning it, but I don't understand the context of 45 days as maximum maturity, when in fact we're talking about, you know, treasury bills and so forth with much longer maturities. What's the 45 days pertain to?
So
Oh,
the
go ahead, Wally.
the 40 yeah, the 45 days is not the maturity of the security, it's the settlement. So basically, if you buy a security, let's say March 1st, 2023, that security has to settle, or that trade has to settle within 45 days. Typically, most of the trades we make settle before that, but this was a new language that code did add this year that we added to the policy. So it's
Yeah,
not the
and
maturity date, it's the forward settlement of the after the purchase.
yeah, and the reason for that is that this was sort of a cleanup comment or cleanup language to the California Government Code when this was passed, because there was some ambiguity about settlement dates and trade dates. And that ambiguity was related to the maximum maturity of security. So for example, if you entered into an investment with a forward date, let's say 30 days in the future, and it was a 5-year maturity, then you were contractually obligated to purchase a security, or you were contractually obligated for 5 years and 30 days from trade date. So the code simply clarified this language that maximum maturity is measured from the settlement date to the final maturity, but also added in some guardrails so that folks wouldn't have unnecessarily long forward trade settles.
Okay. So the 45 days relates to settlement, not maturity at all.
This is one of those California changes that where our policy to be in compliance with code had to have that.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't understand it. And then, let me see, maybe. Actually, that's all my questions. Thank you very much for your answers.
I just have one quick possible edit on page 38. Under the commercial paper section. It's the first sentence after the edited part in purple that says the entity that issues the commercial paper must meet one of the following sets of conditions below. Is there, I was thinking maybe we could change that to at least one or more, maybe at least one, just so that we're not only satisfied with just one all the time. But I mean,
Yeah, this is verbatim, I believe, from the California Government Code.
we must meet one.
Yeah, and it's the following sets of conditions. So A, B, and C, or the second set of A, B, and C.
One of both sets.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So you have to either meet the 3 conditions A, B, C, or the alternative.
Yeah, or the, I make that.
C,
Make
second.
Okay, sorry, okay, I did not have clarity on that. Okay, got it, okay. Okay, then I think the language is fine. Thank you for that clarification. So any other questions or comments? If not, I'm going to take public comments. If you have any, Michelle, on this item, you may not have any.
Yeah, can you take down your the screen, please?
You might as well wait 30 seconds. Okay. We moved into their house, not vice versa. There we are, a fire district.
There's not many public comments on this item. Okay, and then if there, I will entertain a motion to adopt the district revised investment policy for fiscal year 2023-24.
I move that we adopt the district revised investment policy for fiscal year 2023 as presented.
Just a quick question, is this only for this year then? Or does it just have to be?
Yeah, if you recall, we just did the annual review, I think 2 meetings ago. But we had to do the annual meeting because we weren't ready yet with the modifications. So it is an annual process that we will review.
But this stays in effect until it's renewed. Is that correct?
That's.
There are no comments or questions. Roll call, please, Michelle.
Director Bernstein.
Aye.
Director Bloom.
Aye.
Director Jones.
Aye.
Director Fasano is absent. Director Crawley.
Aye, so that motion carries, and I just actually want to thank the finance committee, in particular, Director Bloom, Vice President Bloom, for all the work that they've done, and thanking PFM as well for working with us, and of course, Elaine, who's just an amazing finance manager, so thank you for doing all of this work. I think that this investment policy is so good. I really do. I feel very, very comfortable with it. So thank you. So
Staff drove the process, they did a nice job, so thank you.
thank you.
I just want to add that if we get a 5% return on $50 or $60 million investment, that's a lot of money.
Doing pretty well, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing the results. So thank you very much for all your help.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good evening.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us.
So item 8, the approval resolution authorizing the fire chief to execute a contract with Life Extension Clinics for wellness program services in an amount not to exceed $120,000 and a contract with Bay Sport for wellness program services in an amount not to exceed $70,000. Chief?
This is mine, yes, and I have Melanie online in case you have specific questions about the contract, but really what we have here is this is part of our wellness initiative this year that we budgeted for, and part of that was to move away from Kaiser and move to another provider. In this case, we put out an RFP looking for somebody who would give us what we call NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency compliant physicals, and in addition to that, also to provide our folks with ultrasound, say a full body ultrasounds that help us discover anything that might be lurking. So ultimately, what ended up happening in the RFP is we basically bifurcated it and are asking to award 2 separate contracts. One that will help us internally with our wellness program and for the majority of our folks. The other piece is going to go to the first part with the Life Extension Clinics Inc. And then the second part is to help us comply with the needs of our task force. The Urban Search and Rescue team has a little bit different needs than our general folks. So they need an NFPA compliant physical. They don't need an ultrasound. that they need a number of additional, some additional blood work and some vaccinations. So that's why we are coming to you with requesting approval to authorize me to sign both contracts. $120,000 contract that come out of the general fund, the $70,000 contract is already taken care of via the tax. With that, I will open it up to any questions, but we're looking for approval from the board, authorizing me to sign both contracts.
And so just to be clear, this is the item that was pulled off of last month's agenda, which is why it's here today. Any comments on that? Yeah.
If I just, I have just a quick question. If you could just explain sort of in layman's terms. Does the task force require kind of a higher level of certification of some sort? And is there any rationale for all the employees having that higher level?
So I wouldn't call it a higher level, I would call it a different level that's kind of imposed on us by the federal government. So that the base physical that the task force has to go through for their members is the NFPA. The additional work is a litany of blood work that the federal government requires. I'm not sure what the reasons are. They're not necessarily valuable to our rank and file folks. We believe what LifeScan and other agencies see, the blood work they do for us, they do pretty significant blood draw and evaluation of all those things. It's different, and a lot of it's because of the relationship with the feds. So, and in addition to all the
Yeah, I could fill in a little
We
bit.
just have one more question to fill in, related though. For the people who are our employees, do they get both or do they only get one?
they'll get what they will go through. Well, first of all, on the wellness side of things, it's a voluntary program, so the employees don't have to do. If they're on the task force, then there are employees that have to go through a board to employ. If they want both, they'll go through just one NFPA physical. Then they'll get the additional blood work. We can contract that out through base board. So it will be it's not a duplication of tests or physicals. That makes sense.
That's what I got a question.
No, fine, yeah, so some of the, a lot of the added requirements around this part of the FEMA task force physical is an outcome of the 9/11 emergency. And what they found out is that they did not have good records as the pre-existing conditions. Things like, what's the amount of lead that's already in your bloodstream? Before you were exposed to all the lead of working on the pile. And so there was a lot of legislative change when they started extending the time frame for healthcare claims. And a lot of the healthcare claims were delayed because of the lack of historical data on task force. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to collect this big chunk of baseline data that they can then apply to claims based on incidents that occurred.
With the concept of not taking responsibility for everything, but just their portion of it.
Their portion of what they caused. So it had to do with the whole processing nightmare. I think I can safely characterize it as a processing nightmare of claims coming out of the 9/11 tragedy. And all the legislation that had to be changed along the way was with it manifest changes to the process of doing. I think it's buy-in or third, I don't remember which now. I think it's every other year physical for task force members.
So are the policies of which relate to consumption here? Is that California law or is that federal law?
This is coming as part of our grant.
So I'm asking about, right now, the presumption is, if somebody gets cancer, for example, the presumption is that it was caused by their work. And I didn't know if that is that California law that requires that, or is that federal law?
I don't know. I don't. That would have been my answer.
So you're saying suggesting the federal government is trying to nail down its lesser responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're trying to be responsible in what they do. I don't put it as a criticism. They're very thorough in what they're requiring as part of the grant program for our members to have. And it is dramatically beyond what a normal annual physical would be. Having had it done, they take 10 or 12 vials of your blood for the blood work. And they study things that on a normal basis you wouldn't study. But that's the federal requirement that the grant requires, they require their rules.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Any public comment, Michelle? Okay, I'll entertain a motion
To approve this resolution to authorize the chief to sign a contract with life extensions not to exceed $120,000 and base for long-term services not to exceed $70,000. Is there a motion? Moved by Director Jones, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Vice President Bloom. Roll call please,
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Bloom,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Sweeney, Director Crawley. Hey.
You lied on the wrong person.
Director, before we move on, if I can just make my Academy Award speech and thank people responsible for this, so. Begin with Melanie Stars and Joey Pagoni, who actually worked on the RFP and put together the wellness side, and then John Werdinger and Joey and Bertha out of that staff work. So a lot of work. Thank you. And
Well,
thanks
please thank them
for the support. Thank you.
Please thank them for us.
Chief, could you just tell us why so much work? I don't understand the process.
It's, well, not everybody has, worked on an RFP, so for a lot of people, it's a new thing, so some of it's just learning. Some of it is going through the process of evaluating. We expected to be able to have a single contract out of this, and we ended up having to split it in order to, meet our needs, so it just created additional work, but everybody's oars were in the water on this one, so it's a really good team effort.
Is this the first time you've contracted for this?
We've had, I don't know how long our contract has been with Kaiser, but it's a new program, right? So we're doing more than Kaiser did for us in the past. And so it's new in that respect.
I want to say Kaiser's been probably for the last decade. There was a Redwood City for like 14 years ago. I don't know how long that lasted. And Kaiser took over. So, but I think Kaiser's been really about 10 years, just recollection.
And I'm curious, how do the costs that we have with Kaiser compared to the cost now?
They're not, I don't think they're too different. Had we gone with just base or to do the entire thing, then the number would have been significantly higher. So that was the bifurcation. But Kaiser's total physical contract is not too different than base sports. The lifespan piece is very similar in cost, also, but it provides a much broader service.
Did Kaiser bid on this?
They were, I think they were one of the bidders, yeah. I think we had five bidders.
Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thanks. Moving on to our last regular agenda item, item 9, which is to adopt a resolution authorizing the fire chief to execute a signed letter of agreement with Local 829, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Chief?
I am going to turn this one over to
Francine, okay.
Good evening, Mr. Director. So this side letter has two components to it. Staff has met with ASME on the language. And the reason for the side letter is for the side letter right now is basically for due to roots of attrition as well as division reorganization. So one of the items is a senior management analyst position that was previously represented by ASME. This position is an unrepresented position, so should have never been in the ASME bargaining group. But we met, or the district actually met with ASME, and they agreed once the incumbent retired that they would allow the position to go to the unrep group. The district has 3 senior management analyst positions, 2 of them which were already unread, and one past me, which is, you know, you would never have one classification be represented while the other 2 are not represented, so it makes sense for the position to move into the unread group. The other piece of the side letter is to remove any reference to the community risk reduction officer, which was vacated due to a recent retirement also. The reason being is these duties were rolled into the risk reduction officer position that the district has. And so that position, we would like to take away reference in the MOU to the community risk, I guess, community. How about, sorry, wrong name. Yeah, so ask me an agreement for this, and prior, the district had 2 risk reduction officer positions, one which was going to be the reclass of the sub ed officer, and the other one, which is our new employee in the community and volunteer coordinator.
So I have one quick question. Is side letter the legal term for this agreement? Because usually side letter is not, in my world, I came from, side letter is not a good thing. But this sounds like it's an amendment to an agreement, not a side letter. It's whatever you want to call it. Side letter is the, when it's called a legal term, it's the commonly accepted term of art for these kind of agreements. Not the collective bargaining agreement, it's aside. Okay, that was my question. It's just, it's fine to leave it, it just. The little red flag goes up like, we're doing side level, but okay, if that's the common agreement.
Yeah, I want to sort of piggyback on what Gary, I had the same reaction, and it wasn't from me, it was from years of hearing people say, there's no side letters, or side letters are prohibited. I actually think, and I don't think mentioning this just so that you can research it or something, I think there might be actually a prohibition to side letters when we do agreements with the union in our board policies.
So I actually read the board policy, and what the language says is that the side letter is only valid if the board approves it. And it comes to an open session. Side letter, like Stephen said, is very common with labor groups and public agencies. So I think maybe what has happened before at the district is chiefs have approved side letters, which do not make them valid. They have to go to the elected official, which is council or board, for approval if there's any change to the memorandum of understanding. So that's what the board of compensation and labor relations policy says, is that it's only valid if you approve it, not if the chief approves it or I am the one.
Okay, well, I think it's terrific that you researched this before the meeting, because my memory was imperfect. I had the same impression that the side letter was a dirty word, or 2 dirty words, and
It is when they're not disclosed or not approved,
I mean, it's
but this is disclosed and approved, so to Stephen's point, what you call it doesn't matter.
And ultimately, it all gets rolled into the MOU and
Right.
next time. negotiation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an interim agreement until we negotiate next.
so tell me, when we display this, or when this is posted, how does this letter get, what's its relationship to the MOU?
We're going to it on the labor relations tab of the district's website, right under the ASME MOU, will be a side letter, and I can guarantee there's many agencies throughout this county as well as Santa Clara that will have the same thing. Any side letter they have is publicly posted for citizens or residents to see. So we'll post it on our website.
Okay, and the next time when we do an MOU,
Well,
it would disappear.
Well, it'll be rolled in, so you will be right. Yeah, right.
Okay,
It's a modification to the MOU,
That's right.
part of the MOU, but it's on the side. And I move that the board adopt a resolution authorizing the chief to execute the site letter as discussed.
Absolutely. So is there a second? Okay, so moved by Director Lube and seconded by Director Jones. Will we public comment? Roll call, please, Michelle.
Director
Aye.
Director Loon,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Solano is absent, Director Crawley.
Aye. So that motion carries. So we are now done with the regular part of our agenda. And, we're on to the church agenda items. Is there any agenda item? I have a quick question. Because, so Jim Lewis has brought up the vanity thing forever. Vanity, what do they call them?
Sure.
Yeah.
Cable skirt.
So I'm just gonna put it out there. Do we want to put this on the future agenda? We talked about it. Oh, sorry. So Jim Lewis has brought up for years having these vanity skirts around the table so that it looks more professional. And so I just didn't propose, I mean,
So something staff can use resolve for it.
We would be happy to purchase one on Amazon for less than $100.
so it's within your church, it seems like, oh,
Sure.
okay. Okay, so there's no need to put it on the agenda. Okay. Assuming that that's what the board wants to do.
All wear skirts, yes.
Okay. Okay, so now reports and requests, committee reports, HR, well, HR is covered that you have an emergency.
HR, we did a lot and town meeting of them. But those are the main things we focused on and looked at talked about was the DEI online assessment tool, which is rolling out for the survey and I think everybody is aware that the survey is primarily geared towards gaining staff perspective on their experiences with targets. And so once the survey goes out, the community and kind of questions and has been direction. And now I've gone to the consulting farm, and from there, the question will be rolled out. And then once we make the progress, we will down with the tool, and then we will see where we are. All right.
At the next month, we're gonna be looking at, well, need to be the recruitment that's going on now, how that might fit into our DEI assessment tool and survey. But also the survey, I think you had sent an email to the board that it's gonna be a little bit delayed because, let's talk about that.
Sure, yeah, our plan is just to hold on to it until after we're done with our recruitment and send it out.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Finance?
I'll report on the finance committee, and I'm only going to cover the items we haven't already covered this. We took care of the treasurer's report and the policy, investment policy. The only other thing, the two things that happened at the meeting was we did accept the financial statement audit planning communication letter. So this was the auditors giving us their letter, their scope of work for the annual audit. And as I understand it, the finance committee is the audit committee as far as the district is concerned. And so the auditors did present their letter, what they're going to do in their audit process. We have some questions about their tenure and when that team has to turn over, mostly educational around what regulations are, as far as how long we have this. Good on them, right? And so the finding letter was accepted by the finance committee. And then the last item that we discussed that hasn't already been covered in the meeting was there was discussion about establishing a grant program for volunteer groups. This was a follow-up of the last board meeting. This was delegated to the finance committee. And it was agreed amongst the finance committee and staff to evaluate this in the future as we have more thorough understanding of the overall plans for community preparation and what we're going to do around the resiliency team. given that that's so new. So let them develop their plans and they'll consider this as an appropriate part of the plans to bring it back to the board. And that was satisfactory to the committee. That's where we left it.
Yeah,
Could we discuss for a moment the emergency preparedness?
sure. There was no meeting this month, but yes, go ahead.
Well, as I understand, there may be some changes in the committee or whatever, and I just, if that's being proposed, I think that needs to be an agenda item for the board.
Well, actually, what has happened is that Director Blue has resigned from the committee. And, I'm not gonna repopulate the committee. It's still gonna be a standing committee. Mainly because I wanna have, Chief Johnston and his group, where the community preparedness and community volunteer liaison, or, community volunteer coordinator, fits in right now, to kind of have some breathing space to kind of implement what they want to do. So right now, that I'm not gonna populate it, but that doesn't mean that this is not going to continue to be a standing committee.
Well, I think the committee structure and the committee appointments are something we certainly initiate the action, but I think it's something that needs to be approved by the whole board. And not.
Well, I'm not appointing anybody.
Well, but I don't think you have that option by yourself. I think that is, you not doing it needs to be ratified by the rest of the board. And I happen to think the emergency preparedness committee is really important right now. We've got this response time data that we ought to be looking into. We've got things that are going on in the community that ought to be looked into. And I think it's probably, from the mission of this district, is one of the most important things that we do. And again, I'm not questioning your rationale, and I have no idea where the other board members sit on this, but I think it's something you need to agendize as a change that you're proposing. And I think you need to seek board approval for your action.
I mean, I'm not practicing it, but I'm not removing it as.
That's even me.
Yes, yeah.
So my view on this is that, if Director Bernstein wants to put this on the future agenda topic, he may raise that issue just like any other board member may raise an issue to put anything on an agenda, and it would be considered the same way.
In this case, if you look at the board policies, it says the board, the president recommends appointments and committees, and the board approves those. And I think this is part of that policy that we have.
My answer is the same, I think, which is that I totally agree with you. In this case, your board president has decided not to appoint someone, so a majority of the board could overrule that determination, the way you just described, and the way a majority of the board would do that would be to place an item on the agenda for a future meeting. So the first step would be to put it on the agenda, and the second step would be for a majority of the board to do something other than your board president has determined.
And that's what I'm thinking, is to put it on the agenda.
So we can't decide that. No, I understand, but basically, but here's the deal. Basically, we still have it as a standing committee, and Chuck is still on the committee. Gary's not on the committee, so they can't have meetings, and they can't, there's no forum. So that, right, so can we decide tonight to do this? Because
No, I think my suggestion would be that you treat Director Bernstein's request as a request to put something on a future agenda. You recently adopted a policy and procedure for how that's supposed to happen.
So Jim, I'm gonna go back to the other proposed agenda items and put this on there for next month's agenda. Is that okay with the rest of the board? Okay. Michelle, did you get that? Okay. Liaison reports, item 11, town of Atherton, Gary.
I don't have anything really new to report. Yeah, this discussion continues with, kind of housing element. Although they kind of stepped back from that a little bit, but they're consultant to a lot of the work now. That will come back into play again here, probably in the meeting this week. They've been talking about just a lot of what I call just general city projects, including everything from pickleball courts. The only one that was relevant to the district where I did comment on, just to make sure that they get in touch with Chief Johnson. They were talking about the redesign of the walkway and the curbing all the way along Watkins, along the park. And there's a couple different kinds of things, and currently the real danger of it is that the walkway is so narrow that for the people walking along Watkins, they generally have to step into traffic if they have a stroller or anything else to get around people or poles. And secondly, the curb does not provide any barrier to the vehicle kind of running right into the people that are walking there. It's a rolled asphalt part of it, and part of it was a concrete curb. And they were going to go with this kind of low cost option to essentially leave it the same. And the only comment I made is that that was not in any shape or form really improving the safety of that corridor for pedestrians. And then there were several other public comments on it. And I said that as a public comment as a resident, not as a board member. And they ultimately decided to have the design firm go back and reconsider the design of the curb and how that curb structure is going to work along that road. So at some point, they'll circle up with Chief Johnson on it as well from a, just kind of a width of the road, everything else. There's a lot of challenges. It's the creek. They don't have a lot of room with the creek. And then interestingly, one of the major water lines or gas lines or something runs right along there as well. So even widening it up with fence posts was complicated. So, but they were trying to take a really, they're kind of trying to take an easy, low-cost formula to improve it, and it really wasn't going to improve it. And generally, the residents at the meeting all comment the same thing, so they're revisit. They're actually, and some of the board members thought the same thing. So, or council members, sorry, yeah. So they're redesigning.
Keep this close.
Yeah, it's a fairly major corridor. I think it's major corridor for the fire department as well. Watkins Avenue along Park. Yeah, and it's a major corridor between El Camino and Middlefield Road. And then because of the park, there's a tremendous amount of pedestrian traffic along there as well. And it's always been a little bit complicated. Yeah, it's not great from an emergency access perspective either, as far as where cars are gonna pull off, that there's no turnout area or anything else. So.
I just want to ask you a question. Isn't Blackman slated to be closed as a overpass?
Yeah, there has been discussion, you're correct, about closing the railroad crossing there. Although right now they're in the midst of, I think, a 6-month project of traffic delays there while they improve the crossing. So they're putting all the safety gates up and everything else. Yet at the same time, there's discussion about eventually closing that crossing. But don't ask me why they're doing massive capital improvements to what they may close. But that's still, that would have an effect on Watkins as far as a thoroughfare, would be a thoroughfare at that time. But I don't think that's anytime soon.
So the chief wants to kind of keep on top of that, because that is a pretty major way to get from El Camino to Middlefield Road.
Yeah, their consultants are having the fire district on their list of people, parties to discuss that they have plans.
Okay. East Palo Alto Road?
Well, I guess the only reason I'm standing only here tonight is because the city council taken up a rule regarding housing, housing opportunities here in the city. And I'm sure the pack City Hall right now because that's big of an issue. It's mainly focused on homeowners who have a home renting out a room or in general would have to give a first option to sell to the person that's in their unit. And if the person, they don't have a rental in the unit, they have to give a first opportunity to sell to a nonprofit. project that I didn't want to take practical. So it's pretty highly contentious and, you know, for all the wrong reasons from my perspective, that value will decrease here in the city because when we decide for the market, and it just doesn't grow. And there's already people that are leaving. Putting out a good growth in anticipation of that happens. So, yeah, so anyway, that's one thing I have regarding the vision. So,
I couldn't quite, are you saying you think if it happens, property values will fall?
they will.
If they will.
They will.
That they're-
From my perspective, a real estate person, people just been almost 30 years, seeing it come on.
Okay, I just put the director.
Thank you. Menlo Park?
I just had a question for the chief. Nothing's happened with the city itself, but, there's been reports in the newspaper about the train bridge at El Camino and, the creek. Right there between Palo Alto and Menlo Park. And there was a consultant report 2 or 3 years ago that said the bridge was gonna fall apart imminently, and that they needed to, within a year or two, have a plan for replacing it. Then a new study was just announced that said the bridge is fine, just let's take the rust off and it'll be fine, we don't need to do that. I wonder, is the fire district at all involved in any of this?
John's not here, so I'm not aware of it from our moment. I'll check with Chief Johnston and see. But I mean, I've heard the stories, you know, through the press about that. Yeah, I believe we have.
Nobody in the city seems to be talking about it, so, and the city was supposed to come up with a plan. And it potentially involved traffic patterns and a whole bunch of things there. So anyway,
I'll check with Chief Johnston and get everything.
thank you. Like, other than that,
Thank you. And Rob isn't here for San Mateo County. And he's not here for the ambulance TPA, so the ad hoc committee reports.
Robert, you may want to pause. and
Yeah.
start this.
Yeah.
Shut down.
Quick, I'm glad you're able to kind of help me out here. We consume a lot of time looking at talking about station. Architects selection. Funding, you know, what tonight. He also talks about, look at things that are kind of at forefront locations. I was looking at the ESG was this for the report that was given that they showed. RPG is has been about 14 million. RPG is not 25 million, but a lot of that in terms of cost will narrow it down and what the architect will be with someone and then we need assessment to drive it down in terms of for that. And I think we also talked about referring, the finance question over to finance committee to get a look at the funding.
I don't have a lot to add. Robert defines the most thorough process of any facilities process I've ever seen. Very productive though, and I think it helped orient us all very clearly as to let's understand the requirements. I think that we're in the need for the facility before we start designing. And then we did also spend some time just kind of revisiting that there are a lot of prior studies that have been done that have a lot of information about other firehouses and other facility buildings that we have as to their condition, their state. Granted, it's, I think the one report is about 5 years old now, 4 or 5 years old. But if you just take all the issues and add 5 more years, it's the same issues. There's just 5 years more wear and tear on the buildings. So we did have the context of this project versus other projects. So I think solely on top of it, Scott did a nice job. And I think they'll put it together a really good RFP that'll help us understand the requirements, you know, for what we need to do with that piece of property.
Well, I guess the biggest thing is how do we, what is that kind of process of returning the financing aspect of it? Look at where is there.
No, I think Robert will start with staff work, it'll start with staff work to start looking at financing alternatives at the right time. Right now, I think it's premature and we don't really have a number to shoot at to know what we'll be able to cover from our own capital budgets and reserves and other things. But as we start, you know, kind of, I think that's the nice part about this preliminary study we're doing, design study, is that we'll get some ballpark numbers. And at that point, then we have to look at financing alternatives. What can we self-finance? What will we find external financing for?
Right.
And the instrument.
Yeah.
The work to be part of that.
Yeah, I think your estimate was 10 years before we'd be occupying a new
That was
facility.
John's.
Or John's. Yeah, from today, you know, from whenever we get going, it's probably a 10-year process. So, you know, figuring out the finance and everything else, we have some runway for that.
I think today's, I mean, I was a consultant, came through and talked about the various financing opportunities for money. Look at it, and I know that I heard it correctly, that they don't look into, you know, where to go for that actually needed cash.
Well, they are, PFM is purely investment services. The work they did with Elaine and staff around cash flow analysis, that would allow us to know what kind of cash flow we need for operations versus cash flow we could allocate as a board. You know, what the excess funds have. I guess a side benefit of that process will be, we'll get some numbers as the kind of money we could set aside to start building you know, kind of an additional capital investment pool for that project. But as far as getting advice on how to actually finance the project, that would be out of the scope of the services of PFM. And we'd have to get a financial advisor that does public agency financing.
Yeah, public finance.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna do the cash management of our cash. Yeah, and then public financing is, you know, for investment banking, for corporate finance, within the public sector, the different ball of wax here.
Okay, I mean, when you get competition, you get
Yeah. Okay,
So that is for me.
okay, thanks, Robert. Dispatch services, we didn't really have anything, but, Chuck and I spoke, and I was,
You have some updates, I'm not privy to them.
no, I mean, basically, I was gonna ask if you would chair that ad hoc meetings, but you and I talked
But
about.
you had heard about some new things, that you said they're gonna put it back on the front burner, or something like
Oh, I
that.
think the chief brought that, we talked about that last month. But,
I thought you said there was new developments, and rather than, Mike Halliday had said, no, we'll come back in a year or something, and then you said,
Yeah,
oh, I think it should come back earlier.
yeah, I think the chief reported on that last month. About how it's
he's not gonna do anything for this fiscal year, and so instead of going out, picking out 3 years, he's gonna look out 2 years. In terms of asking for additional funding from the cities and the other part of the fire district.
I haven't heard
Yeah, we
any
haven't.
new news since our meeting and the report out last week, so no new news on my side.
Yeah.
I still think, I think the performance of the dispatch unit is still a critical thing. It has nothing to do with the funding of it, or it might, actually, but it's not obvious that it does. And that we should somehow, I don't know, be looking into that, figuring that out, getting some sort of data from that group. It's just totally unsatisfactory that we're not getting any data.
Well, so would you like to share this?
He's getting, Chief's working on getting the data.
Yeah, but getting back to the actual item, that was what you and I had talked about, and I don't know if you're interested in that. so-
We did, actually, if I would do it, I said yes.
Okay. Then let's just make that change, because I shared that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you meant serve on the committee. I'll do whatever you
No,
want.
no, chair the committee.
I'm
You're-
sorry.
you and I are on the committee.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't,
Yeah. So then, so Chuck would be the chair of the dispatch services ad hoc committee.
and just with, again, not trying to start point, but that probably should be voted out of the whole board also.
Ad hoc committee.
Maybe not, okay,
Yeah, we're talking, the other one's a standing committee.
okay.
Okay, so reports and requests of director item 13, we work with the request. I'm pretty exhausted a lot. Robert? Okay, then I'm just gonna make a quick president's report. As the chief said, there was a string crane screening event on July 9th at Station 1, so again, thank you for opening that. I know that we had a lot, I think it's about 25 people there. From a lot of people that come to the district, including the hood squad who came in and brought in a couple of people and some, obviously some residents from Menlo Park. The person who spearheaded this, Amy Mann, is a Menlo Park resident. And then we had someone from Atherton who's on the Sheboygan High School District Board, South Illinois. So we had a really good representation of district residents coming in and helping. The Elks Club Public Safety Appreciation Night is tomorrow, as the chief said, so I'll be attending that. And I'm looking forward to that. I was also a part of the CERT refresher on July 8th, which was really, really good. So thank you for, you can thank Michael Taylor for that. I thought that people got a lot out of it. It was actually it was very informative. It was good to get that refresher. And I want to thank the board for supporting my candidacy to be on the LAFCO board of San Mateo County, and I got elected to that, so thank you. Which I think will be helpful for to have a representative on there. And my one request, and I kind of brought it up when we talked about the new engines being put out there into the public. Can we have a board, Christine, for
You
that?
said another,
Can we have a board, Christine, for that? Because we've had that before. And I think that'd be fun as a representative of the public. We'd be doing that on behalf of the public. And Gary's never done that, so we should have that opportunity.
like Christian of what?
Of the new engines.
Well, we have all the images together or each one separately?
Well, I mean, that's something that I can work with the chief on.
Probably won't be following that. Would be
Yeah.
Just
It'd be
check.
really
Yeah,
hard.
Just to make sure maybe we can get an engine and truck and figure out a way for 40%.
Yeah. We've done that before.
Response data.
Yeah.
We never had so many of them.
I know, at one time, yeah. But anyway, that's all I got, and I'll open up to public comment number 2. Okay, I'll close public comment number 2, and we'll adjourn the meeting now at 9:22. Thank you.
The record reflect we closed 3 hours earlier than we did.
Yeah.
Make sure it's not in the minutes. Adjourn the